Hi, hey, hello. Attack on Titan has scrambled everyone's brain. The shadow of this series hangs long over me, as it does with anyone willing to engage with it. It sows a collection of narrative seeds so enjoyable to watch grow, while simultaneously engaging in flippant use of the most violent and inhumane components of human history. As you would expect, this has led to some of the most unusual YouTube thumbnails anyone has ever seen. I first engaged with the anime in 2015, where I watched 3 episodes and vowed to return later, interest peaked. In November 2017, I kept that promise, and I watched all of Season 1 and 5 episodes of Season 2 before completing preparations for a move. In 2021, I began the anime again, partly out of a growing desire to return to the series as the fandom had reached a fever pitch at this point. Part of this was also because of an echoing of a particular term associated with the series, this term being fascist apologia. Coming back in from the cold, I thought, well yes, the series certainly has surface-level depictions of nationalism and militarism, but surely this is all some sort of allegory for anti-war sentiments and how the problems that we're ignoring outside of our walls are the real problems that demand our full attention. For those of you who have engaged with the series, you might be familiar with the myriad of events that transpired after the show left my immediate attention that would perhaps cause someone to use the term fascist apologia. So I spent the rest of 2021 watching the entire series up to its stopping point. And then I watched it in its entirety again in 2022. And then I watched the series again in 2023. And then I watched it again with subs. And then I watched it again with fan-translated subs. And then I watched it in English again. And then I watched it again. And then I watched it again. And then I watched it again. I also read all 34 volumes of the manga. And then I read all of those again. And then I read all of those again. And then I read a fan-translated version of the manga. As I'm typing this, I'm currently watching the series yet again. As I'm recording this, I've already watched the series again. I did all this because for every well-written piece of commentary I read on the series, I saw a multiplication in freakish thumbnails, and a multiplication in dubious endorsements of certain characters and their actions. I realized in the subsequent years since first engaging with the franchise that the fandom had ballooned in a number of ways I'd not previously considered, and had both attracted some terrifying and misled people to it. Having armed myself with a comprehensive knowledge on the series to the edge of vomiting, let's take a closer look at the series, talk about some of the points made by those weird YouTube thumbnails, and consider why they arrived there in the first place. Please consider and enjoy. Attack on Titan is a mecha anime featuring 3 central characters. Eren, our point-of-view character for most of the franchise, who at the start of the series has already canonically committed 2 acts of murder, Mikasa, who's canonically committed 1, and Armin, a liberal. The central cast is supported by Jean, Annie, Bertolt, Reiner, Krista, Sasha, Connie, Marco, and Ymir. This society is protected from a persistent outside invasion of massive human-eating titans by 3 major walls. These walls are dotted with spokes housing cities and allow for commerce. In the series' opening events, a colossal titan kicks down the door to the city of Shiganshina, allowing for the outside wandering titans to overrun the city and hit the buffet. Among the once present tense parishioners turned past tense provision is Eren's mother, devoured by none other than the smiling titan of the United States House of Representatives, Marjorie Titan Green. With the last vestiges of Eren's sanity safely digesting in the stomach of that titan, he is whisked away as the wall is breached completely. Eren slips into a dark, deep slumber and has a very strange dream where his father gives him an injection, a key, and tells him everything he needs to know is in the basement of their destroyed home, and then disappears. Without any sort of psychological evaluation, Eren is allowed to join the military, trained on the most efficient ways to kill both contemporaries and Titans, and immediately dies after a second attack occurs on Trost, the city for which he was stationed. Turns out death is a temporary setback, since Eren bursts out of the stomach of the Titan a few episodes later, and with some coaching, helps plug the wall. I wonder if this has something to do with that dream. After being detained and tried for potential war crimes, no one considers giving this child a psychiatric evaluation again and decides not to execute him, which is good, that they might be able to replicate what happened in Trost with Shiganshina. However, while en route, they are ambushed by another Titan that seems to have intelligence beyond the standard giant, and through some deductive reasoning, determine the very cleverly named female Titan is one of Eren's classmates, Annie Leonhardt, and successfully capture and detain her. In the closing segments of the series, we are treated to a piece of destroyed wall crumbling, revealing a Titan behind it, a teaser for what's to come in Season 2. Taking a moment to review, the situation with Eren is already pretty dire. We have a child who witnessed the potential murder of another child, has already murdered 2 adults, this child is in no way given any sort of guidance or counsel, then witnesses the death of his own mother. Absolutely no one seems to think it's a bad idea to allow this child access to military training, and once he realizes he is uniquely gifted with the power of a Titan, is emboldened to make decisions on his own, supported by others who see him as a means to fight back against the conditions of their world. He is permitted to join Erwin and Levi's scout regiment.
Take a look at these big-ass trees.
And given provisionary authority to use his godlike abilities in moments of desperation. Season 1 and volumes 1 through 8 of the manga act as the foundation for which all future radicalization of Eren transpire. Armin is always there to advocate on Eren's behalf without question and with many words, and Mikasa acts as a threat to anyone who dares oppose his power. Season 2 operates mostly as an expansion of the world building from Season 1, and presents us with a few more questions before we start receiving the answers in Season 3 and beyond. We're introduced to Hassan Piker, the Beast Titan. The Beast Titan is the first Titan in this series to speak to a human. Okay, actually, there's this little OVA episode of the series featuring somebody from the Scout Regiment long before the series, taking notes about a particular Titan that she had discovered that called her Ymir. It's a good story, you should watch it. Additionally, we discover that 3 of Eren's graduating class have the ability to transform into Titans. Ymir does so in a defensive capacity, as a means of survival, and Reiner and Berthold reveal themselves to be none other than the Colossal and Armored Titans who kicked off the series' events, doing so as a way to put an end to their yet undisclosed mission. Whatever the ends of this mission are, the means are taking Eren elsewhere. The cost of recovering him is half the Scout Regiment and 1 right arm.
I should advance, goddammit!
Eren, having arrived at this season fully radicalized, has his first taste of helplessness and indecision. First, he is asked not to act, and as a result, several of his squad mates perish. Then he physically cannot act, and several of his squad mates perish. Finally, in a moment of desperation, he acts, and is given an ounce of vengeance and a fraction of actualization. This moment gets put on ice for most of Season 3, but this is the moment Eren, during the times in which he leaves our point of view, most likely thinks back on when making future decisions. Now let's take a quick check-in on Eren's contemporaries. We learn that Krista is actually named Historia and heir to royalty. Ymir learns she can't meet her girlfriend's parents looking like a Titan, so she gives up on existing. Our 2 event-starting Titans link up with Hassan. Connie learns his mom and everyone he's ever known or loved in his entire life has been turned into a Titan by mysterious means. Armin learns he's perfectly comfortable lying about torture as long as no one is actually being tortured. He's perfectly accepting of it 1 season later. And Mikasa learns she'll be spending the rest of the series chasing the shadow of a ghost that once gave her a scarf. Right up to the last episode of Season 2, a through line exists allowing people to see the perspectives of all the major characters. It is certainly too forgiving of Eren, and that doesn't really change. But everyone's actions are relatively understandable, and as a result, I wouldn't question anyone who didn't have their eyebrow raised yet. Whatever the case may be, that should change in a moment. Erwin's scout regiment has discovered several secrets related to the Titans, chief among them being that there are two kinds of Titans. The pure Titans, the kind making up the majority of the threats early on in the series, and the individuals who have the ability to transform into Titans at will. These Titans have a specific designation known as the 9 Titans. There are only 9 of them. They've learned that in order to become one of these 9 Titans, you must consume someone who has this power. These and a few other forthcoming pieces of information make the Scout Regiment enemies of the state. It is implied, and a few episodes later confirmed, that the government has had complete knowledge over this situation the entire time. As is often the case with those with the luxury of wealth and information, this is actually about subjugation. Seeking to maintain their power, Erwin is arrested. Which brings us to today's special. Welcome to Erwin's Gambit. What's Erwin gambling on today? Let's go to the board and find out. Today, Erwin is gambling that Hanji and Levi are able to get enough information to prove there's a government plot being kept from the people. It just so happens there's a Shadow King safeguarding the secrets of the land who's placed an oligarchy at the front of society to manage it. Eren and Historia aren't captured, they are. And that they aren't killed. Eren is almost killed, but he swallows a bottle labeled armor and gets a new ability. Number 4, that he can convince both the head of the garrison regiment and the head of all military operations that all his information is verifiable and true.
I knew this would happen someday. The state could only hold people in this cramped world for so long before they began to lash out.
And that he can use all of this information to overthrow the government and place Historia as the head of the government. Thankfully, all of that works out perfectly fine with an Eren Sorkinian level of certainty. They arrest the oligarchy, depose the fake king, kill the real one, and install Historia as the new queen. Supposedly, this is a new governing system. However, nothing changes. We'll get back to that later. During the recovery of Eren and Historia, it is discovered that Eren's father had indeed given him an injection, which turned him into a pure Titan. He consumed his father, Grisha, and took both the power of the Attack Titan and a Titan known as the Founding Titan, a Titan with immense power to control other Titans, but only when in contact with or used by someone of the royal bloodline. A bloodline that goes all the way back to the start of the Titan Curse. During this scuffle, they also gain one injection of this fluid that can turn someone into a pure Titan. Since humans that can turn into Titans have the ability to regenerate, this is an invaluable resource outside of the obvious use case that they can take a Titan from the opposition. With the Scout Regiment reformed, a plan is made to return to Shiganshina and secure the wall that was destroyed kicking off the events of the series. This would allow them to go back to Eren's childhood home and read the secrets Eren's father, Grisha, kept in the basement, the carrot that's been on the stick up to this point. The plan to take back Shiganshina proves difficult, as Hassan rains down boulders on one end of the wall, and a battle between Eren and the Scouts versus the two Titans takes place on the other. It is a seemingly impossible battle for the Scouts to win, and with every throw, the number of dead soldiers rises. In an act of desperation, Erwin hatches a plan to run a distraction team head first into the Beast Titan to entice him to attack and kill all of them. This would allow Levi the chance to use the perimeter of guard Titans laced around their exit as trees from which to swing upon and capture the Beast Titan, a plan that is only partially successful as the Beast Titan does end up escaping. Erwin has a moment of reflection before charging to his death that has always stuck with me. He confesses to Levi a, by his words, selfish desire to survive. He's right at the metaphorical and literal door to all the answers the series has given question to, and he knows he has to die so someone else can open it. Both their world and our world are cruel. It may not be literal Goliath crushing and devouring us, but nonetheless, we are crushed and devoured. The change that needs to happen in our world in order to make it a better one will come. What currently keeps the planet going, if going is something we'd like to call it, isn't going to last much longer in the grand scheme of things. It is built on the inequity of billions of people. It's not something that is exactly made to last. It is, however, going to take longer than anyone I know or love will live. I empathize with Erwin's desire to know what will happen next, and I am sympathetic to the fact that he never will. At the end of the bloody conflict, Hassan has the opportunity to meet with Eren briefly. Levi, having just killed several Titans and nearly Hassan, seeks to make good on a promise he had made and ends their discussion prematurely. The Scout Regiment ends this battle with most of their current unit dead. Joining the dead would either be Armin or Erwin. Armin sacrificed himself as a means to allow Eren the time to scale the Colossal Titan and neutralize him for a forthcoming devouring. Flock, a character we're briefly introduced to a few episodes prior, seemingly unimportant, but very relevant to our discussion here later, recovers the last remaining person breathing on the battlefield other than himself, a swiftly fading Erwin. The injection the Scout Regiment earlier acquired becomes the platform to discuss the merits of these two characters and decide who ultimately gets to live. Armin and Erwin cling to life while both sides consider what future good either man can bring to humanity. In the end, Levi, who is given the injection for safekeeping, allows his friend the luxury of death, resurrecting Armin.
Guys, please, help me!
Flock takes this as a personal slight to both himself and humanity, but later will have a change of heart. The change of heart is for the worst. With Armin brought back from the brink, the remaining scouts make their way to the basement of Eren's old home. Upon investigation of his father's lab, the scouts find a series of journals tucked away in a hidden drawer and read from them the tale of Grisha's life, answering 100 years of curiosities. The land for which the series takes place at this point is actually an island called Paradis. 100 years ago, a conflict took place between the neighboring nation of Marley and a group known as Eldian, who just so happened to be the people with the ability to turn into Titans. Astonishingly, the Marleyans won, and the then leader of the Eldian people fled to the island of Paradis. This king of the Eldians despised his own race, and saw their access to violence as a somehow immutable fact. Thus, he sequestered his people on the island of Paradis. This act was the king's grand solution to live a life of peace away from the rest of humanity. He turned hundreds of people into the walls that make up this civilization. He used this wall as a threat against the rest of the world to be left alone. Once secure, the king used the power of the founding titan, a scream with the ability to erase the memories of his people, that they might live a life of peaceful ignorance, a solution that obviously satisfied no one but himself. Back in the nation of Marley, what remained of the Eldian population were relegated to armed, patrolled ghettos for the crime of carrying the Titan bloodline. Grisha was born in one such ghetto and had a radicalizing moment where he witnessed the death of his sister for trespassing beyond the walls of the ghetto. This radicalization led him to joining a group known as the Eldian Restorationists, a group that sought to locate and use the power of the founding titan as a way to restore their former empire. It is no small coincidence that Grisha fell in love with Dinah Fritz, a woman of the royal bloodline. They gave birth to a child named Hassan and sought to educate him on the methodology and ideology of their organization with the intended purpose of having him attain the founding titan. But before they could enact this plan, their plot was discovered. Dinah and all of Grisha's compatriots were taken to the island of Paradis, and it is here that we see the creation of titans. Injected and punted over the wall to roam the island mindless and trapped in agony forever. Mercifully, Grisha was spared this fate. The officer who was to send him over the wall explains to Grisha that he had been cooperating with the Restorationists, that he himself was secretly an Eldian, and that he contained a great power, the power of the Attack Titan. He then quietly reveals the most relevant piece of information imaginable to Grisha. He tells him to protect Eren, Armin, and Mikasa. the names of 3 characters he's never met who don't even exist yet. He reveals to the audience the power of the Attack Titan is the ability to see the future. He offers this power to Grisha and asks him to complete his mission. In present day, the conflict has ended. Eren kisses the hand of the newly crowned Historia in an act of fealty to the new government of Paradis, the island of the Eldians. This hand is a hand of royalty, and thus he is treated to something we are not, a vision of the future. Whatever he sees shatters him from the broken pieces of glass he already was to so many grains of sand.
If we did cross the sea, and we killed our enemies, after that, would we finally be free?
The 4th season, which, much like Eren Yeager, has been broken into several pieces, presumably as a means to extend the franchise for many years, starts with us seeing the other side of the war. Marley recruits children as potential bearers of one of their remaining 9 Titans. During the opening episodes of this season, we learn about life in Marley through the eyes of these new POV characters. We see their ideological differences, their ideological agreements, and we see the potential for the cycle of violence to continue through the eyes of one particular character. We also see that Eren has secretly entered the country under the guise of a war-rattled veteran of the Marleyan army. He uses this disguise as a way to get in touch with Hassan and get some clarity on what exactly Hassan meant about saving him the last time they spoke in Shiganshina. Hassan reveals his true intentions, that he seeks to sterilize all Eldians using the combined power of his royal blood and the power of the founding Titan, which Eren possesses. They agree upon some terms on when and where to enact this plan, and then Eren commits some war crimes while he's in the area, forcing the Eldians to come to his aid and recover him. Sasha is killed by Gabi, one of the child soldiers of Marley. Having been alongside her compatriots for some time, her death stings among her still remaining friends, and creates tension in whatever sort of peace negotiations could possibly come. A series of convoluted schemes ensues that ultimately ends with Eren and Hassan finally attempting to make contact and access the full potential of the founding Titan. At the moment of their success, Eren is comically decapitated by a bullet from Gabi, going 2 for 2 on members of the 104th Cadet Corps. However, as the life drains from Eren's eyes, either from the spin or the lack of blood running to them, Hassan catches Eren's head, and the two are transported to a realm where they are allowed a moment to converse. This realm exists as a metaphysical connection to all Titans, and plays a role in how Hassan intends to use the power of the founding Titan to sterilize his people. It is quickly revealed that Eren has no intentions of doing this, and instead seeks to use the power of the previously mentioned walled Titans that once kept them confined as a tool to literally flatten the Earth. We are zipped back to the real world, where anime's most public scene of body horror transpires, and Eren attempts to enact his plan to wipe out all non-Eldians, a plan known as the Rumbling. Now, if all of that sounds like a lot, that's because it is. I did just condense 33 of the 34 volumes of a manga and 3.75 seasons of a television show into roughly 3,400 words. But the importance of this will be obvious as we begin to go through people's misinterpretations of the franchise. The first is the most general of all arguments, the classic,
"It's just an anime. Not everything is political."
And to that I'd say, man, that's both boring and wrong. The boring part of it is that ostensibly every product you've ever consumed in your whole life has labor involved. Labor that is usually exchanged for currency. That currency usually comes at the end of an exchange that is uneven for one person. But also, really? This anime? This one? This is the one we're having this argument about? I'd just ask that if you or someone you know has ever said something like this, that you just be a more honest person about yourself, about what you're seeing, and how you speak about it. Simultaneously, we have to stop acting as though art does not play a role in people's interpretation of our world. or that art is not an expression of that interpretation. A US politician cited the television show 24 as a justification for torture. While I'm attempting to be as cautious as humanly possible while using the word art in close association with an anecdote on the television show 24, it's a really good example of a work of fiction influencing real-world politics. The next argument is also somewhat easy to break apart if we're engaging with media honestly.
The series isn't anti-Semitic. Not everything is political.
Earlier, we saw the Eldian people, those with the capabilities of turning into a Titan, have been relegated to walled, patrolled ghettos. In these ghettos, they're forced to wear identifying marks in the form of armbands to signify their class designation. At the surface level, it's already pretty obvious to see the characters are intentionally illustrated in clothing and in situations that are representative of the ghettos and concentration camps the Jewish people were forced to live in during World War II. This is a horse that's been beaten to death in the commentary of Attack on Titan. However, we've already seen hundreds of horses die in the course of this video, so what's a few more on the pile? More so, the Eldians' ability to become Titans in the first place speaks to a white supremacist fear of mistrust surrounding Jewish people, the assumption that they possess hidden powers that they will wield to exact vengeance on others. Getting more particular, the fact that Titans consume people echoes an even larger white supremacist trope called blood libel. A version of blood libel discusses the requirement of human blood for the baking of matzah, which is consumed during Passover. Parallels also exist between the characters of Bertholdt and Reinar, with Gog and Magog bringing about the apocalypse and resurrecting the Antichrist. The attacks on Paradis themselves even echo the Siege of Jerusalem, an attack where the Romans beset upon Jerusalem and wiped out the entire city. The Tiber family, which I didn't cover beforehand because they both enter and exit the story pretty quickly, are a family of Eldians who stood with the Marleyans in the war against the Eldians that predates the series. As a result, the Tiber family is left with all of their wealth intact and continue to operate as leaders of the Marley nation, speaking to the Jewish people run the world stereotypes weaponized against Jews since time immemorial. All of these stack up in such a way that it's kind of just dishonest to view them as anything other than a cheap anti-Semitic pastiche of Judaism. And it's clear that the writing is only interested in the suffering and anti-Semitic components of Judaism. However, one thing that isn't anti-Semitic to say is, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Another common pushback I hear is,
the series isn't fascist apologia, it's clearly anti-war.
I do believe the series does an adequate job of showing the horrors of war. Death is commonplace in this world. Suffering is commonplace in this world. Suffering as a consequence of dwindling food and supplies. Suffering in the pursuit of information. Suffering as a direct result of a government upheld by lies. People die in this series as a consequence of all of these actions. I think all of this is perfectly fine to put in a show that is interested in discussing the weight of war. However, for reasons that we went over in previous chapters, and for some we're about to get into, the series is completely comfortable forgiving its fascist undertones. I couldn't really find another place to insert this nugget of information, and it's been discussed in nearly every piece on this particular topic. But Commander Pixis is based on Akiyama Yoshifura, a general in the Japanese Imperial Army during World War II, a war in which they fought on the side of the Axis powers and committed many atrocities against Korean people and several other people across the planet. But again, we'll earmark this topic for just a moment. Related to the motivations of specific characters, some of the loudest arguments about the series revolve around X character was right. The three characters I hear this most about are Flock, Hassan, and our main character, Aaron. By the way, these arguments are centered primarily around the final act of the series, so this is a broad, general warning. We are about to spoil the end of the series. We are in spoiler territory.
Flock was right.
One of the examples consistently parroted about Flock's correctness states,
If they reach Aaron and kill him, then Paradis will drown in a sea of blood. The world will seek revenge and butcher your parents, your siblings, and every kid on this island. Your hearts and souls to the cause!
Put another way, if Aaron dies, they will kill us all. This statement comes after Eren finally strikes out on his own to enact his plan of genocide on the rest of the planet. Again, he intends to do so by using those Titans within the wall, a plan known as the Rumbling. A separatist Eldian group who identify themselves as Jaegerists support Eren's efforts, while the rest of the Eldian standing army and government seek to, at the very least, figure out what Eren's motivations are.
Take a look at these big-ass trees.
The reason why people say Floch was right is because at the end of the series, war does return to the land of Paradis. The island is laid to waste and most people on the island are killed. The cycle of violence continues and nobody won. The reason Floch is incorrect about this statement is because this has nothing to do with Eren dying. At no point during this franchise did anyone actually attempt to negotiate terms of peace. There are moments where important figures of Paradis meet with important figures of the rest of the world. Most of those figures are interested in the massive payload of resources that reside on Paradis, but I digress. At no point did any two official diplomats of either nation ever attempt to work out terms of peace. Eren's attack on Marley could have been a chance for this as well. Someone could have went to Marley and said, "Look bro, so Eren was out of pocket for that. We didn't know what he was doing. We took him apart like a Lego man. He's in a hole right now. And we have a nuke looking at him right now, and someone looking at the nuke. Now I know we dusted a bunch of your homies. That was messed up. You did turn a bunch of our homies into giant man-eating monsters though. Why don't we squash this and try to talk?" Sadly, this conversation never happens. At the end of the series, some of our main and supporting cast do return to the island of Paradis, having just taken actions that ended the Curse of the Titans. This does remove the island of Paradis' ability to reclaim a monopoly on violence, since they can no longer use the power of the 9 Titans they once possessed. These Eldians returning to the island has been cited as potential peace negotiations, but I'll point out, all of them are Eldian. We don't see a single Marleyan diplomat on the ship with them ready to negotiate. We even hear the Eldians discussing concerns that the ship wouldn't make it to shore, admitting to a growing concern that the violence is not over. So all negotiations are simply about permitting these particular Eldians back on the island, and not a greater discussion on peace. Another line in Floch's defense is,
"Everyone here is an enemy. These are just our enemies' homes. Don't forget what they did to us. The Titans who have been slaughtering our people for years came from here, right? They've been eating us alive. So they've got this coming and then some."
Now, if you saw this as a Facebook post or a tweet and the profile pic was of a man in his early 50s sitting in his car with his sunglasses on, you would understandably question where this man was on January 6, 2021. Among some fans, this statement is used to justify his motivations in supporting Eren and his genocide. Floch is someone who has witnessed all of his companions torn to pieces by rocks. He assumes those rocks are thrown by someone who is acting on behalf of the Marleyan government. The misunderstanding is the notion that these actions are justification, that his acts are just. They're not. The Eldian people are individuals who suffer from a literal war crime of collective punishment. People who are punished for the actions of another party. At this point in the series, where the monopoly on violence is shifting in favor of the Eldians, Floch seeks to exact that same level of violence back on the civilians of Marley. There is a term to describe these actions. It's not justice. It's vengeance. So again, Floch is wrong. He is wrong because there was never a moment where the people were allowed to negotiate. He killed them first. The next perspective is from the camp of
Hassan was right.
This one's a little more cut and dry. If you'll remember, in Season 4, Eren and Hassan meet to exposition dump their origin stories onto one another and share their plans. Eren intentionally remains cagey about his intentions, while Hassan reveals his. He has been using his access to power, being that he is a literal weapon for the Marleyan government, to get in contact with the individual who controls the Founding Titan, which now happens to be Eren. Hassan is a royal descendant, and thus can, by contact or consumption, access the power of the Founding Titan. The Founding Titan links every Eldian together, and with this access, he seeks to sterilize the entire race, ending the potential threat of the Titans forever. This is just genocide by another name. That name is, of course, eugenics. It has been weaponized against people based on their race, the fact that they're disabled, their sexual orientation, and a myriad of other criteria. To illustrate the recency of this, until April of 2023, Finland required sterilization in order to receive gender-affirming care. Eugenics are a clear and obvious violation of a person's right to reproduce, if they should choose to do so. I make this distinction so the freaks who would say something along the lines of,
"Well, isn't getting your tubes tied or a vasectomy the same thing?"
earn their Oni Spumoni issued blasting. Get out of here, you weirdos. The last of the three most prominent character defenses is,
Aaron was right.
In discussing this, we also incorporate another talking point, which is,
Aaron had to do it.
So let's cover these simultaneously, which should also clarify the much aforementioned fascist apologia. As to what Aaron was right about, an overwhelming number of arguments gesture vaguely to Aaron's spite held towards the humans. You see, the series ends with war beginning again, wiping out yet more of what remains of humanity, and the assumed resurrection of the Titans. We're shown, in all versions of the story, a young girl wandering into a tree, this tree being the location where Ymir gains the original power to become a Titan. Aaron, having been a person who suffered the violence of humanity and the Titans, is somehow proven correct when violence starts again. As an individual who occupies the greatest monopoly on violence this fictional world has ever seen, and the ability to see the future, what exactly did he do to prevent it from happening? Armin even calls him out on this in the animated version, this being maybe the one piece of credit that I can give to the character. The truth is, by Aaron's own admission, is that he wanted to see the violence. His maintenance of the violence means whatever he decides the answer to the question of, will the violence end, is the correct answer. There's a pretty boring conversation that could be had on various forms of time travel, clairvoyance, and foresight in fictional media, and I'm sure someone's already had that discussion on YouTube, and it's probably an hour long. If you feel compelled to have that argument, please, go seek out the arguments and report back. For everyone else, I'll just ask, if you were granted the ability to see one day into the future, and you saw yourself die in a car accident, assuming you didn't pine for the loving embrace of death, would you get in a car tomorrow? I mean, if a car crashes into the second story of your apartment and you die that way, well, you gave it your best effort. But I'm pretty sure most people wouldn't be putting the keys in their car and making a T-bell run. Eren Yeager wielded a 770-foot tall stick and asked the world to fight him, and when they did, he literally flattened 80% of them. I do feel that someone could be forgiven for asking the question, did he really have to do it? A moment in the animated version of this series has Eren and Armin discussing their actions in a similar fashion. Arigato, Eren. Kabe no muko no kyuden o misete kurete. Kore wa watashi tachi ga issho ni yatta koto desu. Dakara korekara mo issho ni iru yo. Kongo doko? Sonzai shitaru jigoku. Watashi tachi ha jinrui no 80% o koroshita batsu o ukeremasu. Eren calls himself an idiot with too much power, and recognizes he has no ability to focus and wield it. Simultaneously, Armin takes responsibility for his part in the bloodshed, and says if there is a hell, he will gladly rest there next to Eren forever. A correction to the manga's seeming endorsement of Eren's actions. Armin, in the manga, literally thanks Eren for butchering 80% of humanity, that the intended goal of Eren's demise might occur, thus bringing about an end to the Titans. And if I'm being completely honest, this is maybe the most painful component of people's analysis on the series, personal or public. I asked several people how they felt about this scene without offering any form of commentary. And of the people I asked who had both read the manga and watched the anime, most agreed this is a positive thing. I don't want to fully disparage the notion that it is not some sort of good thing that these characters, in a moment of peace, can admit their wrongdoings and take accountability for themselves. However, what this doesn't do, and I can't possibly stress this enough, is absolve them of their actions. Eren is simply stating that he killed 80% of humanity, and the fact that he feels kind of weird about it doesn't wash his hands clean of the fictional digital Red. I know this sounds extremely goofy, but when you pair these feelings right next to someone saying Eren was right, Eren did nothing wrong, Eren had to do it, someone stating this conversation as a fix starts to feel strange. Isayama stated in an interview with the New York Times that he wanted the conversation between these two characters to end on the notion that Armin was attempting to use strong language to try and take joint responsibility for the atrocities they had caused. But reading the original conversation, something else happens. I asked several people to translate the page that this conversation ends on from Japanese to English, and all of them gave me various versions of "Thank you for being the butcher we needed." So the words were pretty directly translated, if not lacking a little seasoning. Incidentally, people are led to forgive Eren. It feels like the author is speaking through Armin, lamenting the creation and destruction of a particularly violent media figure he created, one that quickly escaped his scope and became a national and global phenomena. All of that to say, I think it would be dishonest of a reader to not take an author at their word when they don't see anything wrong with thanking a character for their violence, and what that could say about a person's worldview. One of the reasons Attack on Titan is so captivating to so many people is its attention to detail. The revelation of the female Titan and the discovery that other people can become Titans at will, the mystery of what the Titans are and how they came to be, the patience the series has getting you to the basement to get those answers, while also drip-feeding you information about future events like the rumbling as far back as the end of the first season. It's so careful with these elements, and it is such an overstated part of what makes this show so enjoyable to watch. But this is also what makes parts of the series so difficult and frustrating to engage with. The uncontested subjugation of thousands of people inside the walls. The recreation and the stale maintenance of the power structure that once existed outside the wall in a world that has absolutely no use for it. Take a moment and consider, at what point does money need to exist in a world where at any point a giant can kick down your wall and turn everyone you've ever known or loved into paste? The series spends so much time telling us about the agony of its world. People dying of starvation as a consequence of dwindling rations. The greed and lack of humanity from the people at the top of its power structures. The struggle for resources and knowledge to advance its people. Nationalism used as a tool to radicalize and control those people. The show is so creative in its ability to show violence. But one can't help but feel disappointed about the lack of creativity in the resolution of those problems. Make no mistake, this is not a critique of the ending per se. The people of this particular story not being able to resolve their conflicts and figure out how to make the world better makes sense. Their doom of repeating the past is reasonable as they did not learn the lessons required to advance. The frustration comes from knowing that they could have, if only the writer could have. Judging his worldview based solely on the contents of his work, I can't help but suspect that Isayama is a liberal. I mean, Isayama is a liberal in the academic definition. Someone who believes in individual rights, civil rights, and the right to political equality, but simultaneously believes in the capitalist infrastructure that diametrically opposes that progress. Capital fundamentally requires inequality in order to sustain itself. There must be an underclass serving the owner, or there is no capitalist structure. This worldview blocks the ability to view the world not as it is, but as it could be. It stifles creativity, and creativity without an ounce of irony is required to escape the structure we live in. When you view the world through this lens, you are able to see someone who has walked directly up to the line of real progress and simply cannot see beyond it. Someone pointing and wondering what lies beyond their sight. I started writing a version of this script in 2020, a great year for eating up massive amounts of free times with doing tasks alone. I've written another version of it every year since, realizing I needed to read more, do more, research more, and write more. I've considered this a fruitful learning experience in not saying something, as well as how to let go of a lot of hours of work. In that time period, 2 high-profile conflicts have escalated into what the 24 news cycle calls wars. They're spoken about as though the conflicts are relatively new. Our government facilitates the violence through arms deals, and by extension, in one particular location, allows said location to hold the monopoly on violence. These actions aren't unique necessarily, and they are precipitated ad nauseum all across the globe, all in the name of acquisition of land, resources, and by extension, wealth. Answering the hopefully obvious question now of why are the politics of Attack on Titan so confusing to so many people, the truth is we're not instructed on how to critically analyze media. We're constantly persuaded to uncritically assume our government is operating in the best interest of its people, while many of our own citizens suffer and die in the gutters. Considering all this, it makes sense that individuals who struggle to recognize the world's real atrocities may struggle to appropriately analyze fictional ones. I had let into my heart the smallest bit of cynicism about the world when I began writing the 4th version of this script. As I continued writing, though, I've been shown time after time the resilience and unbreakable spirit of the people of Gaza and the West Bank. I've been shown people across the planet willing to stand in the face of armed police, governing bodies, employers, and all manner of powerful people and organizations, proving a dedication to the idea of an end to violence. That the people suffering from that violence deserve what we all deserve: freedom. Freedom and dignity. I don't want the takeaway here to be that you can't enjoy something that has problems with its messaging. What I ask of you is what I asked at the beginning of this. Please consider and enjoy. Thank you. I can't remember if I've outlined who gets a shout out at the end of the video, but there's so few of you right now that we'll just go ahead and announce all of you. So thank you, LED, Jack O'Keefe, Pugs Please, Bump, David New, Brian, Harkavane, The Beige Knight, and Tracy McGrath. Next, I'd like to thank anyone who's been waiting on this particular video to be produced. I posted about this on my aforementioned Patreon, but unfortunately I fried my previous hard drive and lost about 5 terabytes of unbacked up video footage. Since the producing of this video, however, we have made a significant upgrade to a several terabytes NAS thanks to the unofficial sponsorship of Tim Rogers and the Action Button Project. So once again, thanks to Tim, and if you somehow know who I am and don't know who he is, please consider giving him a follow at youtube.com/@actionbutton, and maybe check out some of his Friday streams over at twitch.tv/actionbutton, where you'll see some of the work of yours truly. Additionally, I'd like to thank him along with Choops and lowercase j for proofing this video. All of your notes, insight, and critiques were invaluable in the making of this and future videos. Thank you. Next, I'd like to extend my gratitude to the wonderful Little Bear,
Let's go, dude,
who provided the voice of the contrarian anime fan in this video. This is hilarious if you know anything about her at all, because she's not a particular fan of anime. So, thank you. You were an absolute gem to work with, and if you're watching this on stream, hi chat. Anyone who is watching this not on her stream, head over to twitch.tv/littlebear36 and give her a follow. So there was one topic that was intended for the post-credits that I've decided to section off and move into its whole entire video. It will be the next video that I make, and you'll understand why whenever it comes out. I needed it to have its own space, and it was clear that it was not going to get it in the discussion of this video. It has nothing to do with Attack on Titan, by the way. However, I just want to say, again, thanks for everybody and their patience with this video. This one has had several events happen that have delayed it, some of which I discussed, and some of which you'll find out in the next video. However, I think I'll probably be forgiven once you find out what that is. Anyway, I just want to say thanks again. Thank you for watching to this point. Again, subscribe to Patreon if you like this video. I'm not a great salesman in that regard. I should probably get better about that. Anyway, thank you. Bye.
Mario.